Anja, thank you very, very much for your time for this interview. And I really feel like it's more of a conversation. So thank you.
Pleasure. It's great to be here.
It's so wonderful. Been watching you all and following some of what you're doing. So it's always a joy and such, it's kind of like a, I don't know, a guilt-free way of having meetings that I'm getting some work done, but it's also like, oh gosh, it's so much fun. So I appreciate getting to know you and hearing more of your story. So I'm going to let you, Anja, just go ahead and just jump in and share about your work and your story, and then we'll pop into some other questions.
How far back do I need to go?
Well, it's up to you. I know that the whole arts thing is really valuable. However you want to integrate your story, we're just open to hear.
Well, let's start with right now, right here. I'm the artistic director and also founder of Justice in Motion, which is a physical theatre company based in Oxford in the UK. And we focus on creating work that is really impactful and speaks about social injustice issues, but through really exciting and captivating and engaging means as well. So the shows that can be enjoyed just for its artistic craftsmanship, but also really pack a punch every time. That's where we're right now. It's been a beautiful roller coaster. So each of our shows is an emotional roller coaster for audience members and also for us. So I've started it about 8 years ago, and that that came about because I got passionate about doing a work about modern slavery. And then, initially, now let's go back a bit further. I trained in musical theatre years and years ago now, musical theatre and then contemporary dance. And then I discovered physical theatre and studied that with Danny Scott and also Mary Scott quite intensively in Vienna. I performed in one of their shows called Faces. That was about, I don't know if you know it, the piece about a prostitute who comes to, through faith comes to her rescue, really. And that had a profound impact on me, I would say, early on in my career. When they moved back to Oxford, they invited me to come and do an apprenticeship with them as well. So I was like, okay, why not? I worked with a children's theatre company for 2 years in Austria and Eastern Europe. And that was fun, but it wasn't quite what I wanted to do. But physical theatre and telling stories through the means of your body, that really excited me. And also the way that Danny and Mary approached theatre and theatre making, I really loved. And so I was like, okay, I want to learn more from them for sure. So I took the opportunity, came to England as well, came to Oxford. That was more than 12 years ago now, so over a decade. It seems like a long time now. I did an apprenticeship with them for 18 months and then kind of deviated out of the arts a bit. It was really interesting because I felt strongly a calling on myself to be an artist, and yet had fallen out of love with it after that apprenticeship as well, and all sorts of things that had happened. I was like, I'm not sure if God is really asking me to do that, if that is really what I should be doing, because clearly I would be working within the field. I would be an artist. I would work as an artist. I would, be invited to auditions and I would be performing with a company, and this is all not happening. So I was a bit like, nah, Lord, I think you need to help me out here, because if that's what you're calling me to, then, I'm going to need you to open some doors, because there aren't any open doors right now. So I have to say, maybe also I grew up in a Christian household. So I was a Christian all my life, really. But age 16, had kind of frivoled away a little bit from that relationship to God as well. And only age 25, I felt this tap on my shoulder. God got to say, I think it's time to come back. And that is when I met a lot of my Christian friends, and very, very good, strong, solid friends I still have now, and Danny being one of them as well. So that kind of happened throughout that time. And then I came back through faith, through the performing arts, actually. And that combination between arts and faith, and that understanding of, okay, there is a thing that is the Holy Spirit as well. So it's not just God and Jesus, that there's also Holy Spirit. So this extra element, I was like, okay, I haven't really known that before yet. So yeah, age 25, that happened. I went to England and then did the apprenticeship and then stopped for a while. I then worked in hospitality for a while and yeah, didn't really do much art. And I worked with some local dance companies for a bit, but it was just like nothing really progressed forward. It was like we worked on a 10-minute piece and I was like, hey, and what now? Nothing happened. Then I worked for a little while with from Oxford University with students and productions that they put on. But it was all unpaid. And initially my sense was like a bit unprofessional and I've kind of trained this professionally and where am I going from here? It was phenomenal. The love and dedication and commitment that those students had to the art and the craft and just telling the stories was just mind-blowing. So I was like, okay, I do really enjoy that. And maybe I do have to kind of ease back into the arts. Yeah, as I say, I didn't get many opportunities then to perform. My dream was always to be a dancer in an acclaimed dance company touring internationally. That was my big dream. And because I hadn't trained in one of the big dance schools, I just didn't get any invitations to auditions. So it was tricky. And sometimes I did a workshop or did smaller works with company members from bigger companies who would see me dance and work with me and then go, oh, it's so nice to work with somebody so mature and really, really knowledgeable and such a beautiful dancer. And I'm like, yes, clearly, but you're in the company that I wouldn't even get my foot in. It was just like frustration, I would say. That was the general notion. And then a few people said, like, why don't you just do your own stuff? And I was going, no, I don't have any ideas and I don't like to work on my own. I would much rather prefer to work in a team. No, I don't think that's a good idea at all. But because there weren't opportunities, I was like, okay, fine, I'll try something. And so I started working on a short solo piece called Dare to Dream, because the whole thought around, without vision, people perish, right? Without having that vision that gives us life, that fuels us on, we just die. There's just no other way around it. We need that vision, that aspiration, that fuel for our lives. And so I went around and asked a few people about their stories and what their dreams were when they were smaller and whether they're still following those dreams or not, and had some phenomenal conversations with people, most of whom had big dreams when they were younger and then just lost them and just went on with life. And it was so deeply painful to hear that and to see people not thriving and wilting because they hadn't been following their dreams. So I made a short solo piece, 20-minute piece about that. And I asked a friend from the student company whether she would compose some music for it. And then asked a friend who's a musician whether he would also perform live with me on a saxophone. And then I asked another friend whether she'd want to write a poem as like a storyline. And she then started praying into it. And whilst we were doing some rehearsals, she was simultaneously writing on this Holy Spirit inspired poem, which is beautiful. We used some of the voice recordings from the people that I interviewed. And then we had a soundtrack with that as well. And there was a lot of imagery. I used a lot of balloons signifying the dream, and just made this piece about dreams, which was gorgeous and really good fun. And what I've realized when we performed, it was part of a platform. So there were several companies. Even though I was a solo performer, my team actually was the largest of all. Even though there were group pieces and everything, I had a musician, a composer, a photographer, a costume designer, even a lighting designer, a poet. It's just like crazy. And I loved the whole process of everyone feeding into that process and making the piece that way. And I loved it. Then I got some funding, some support to develop this piece further and create a full-length solo show. And I was like, okay, great. That sounds fabulous. I had a year to go back into the studio, 10 days of rehearsal space, and then come up with this 1-hour show. It took me about 9 months to go back into the studio, I was completely paralyzed. I was like, I have no ideas. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I don't want to work on my own, and all of those voices again. Eventually, I was like, I'm going to lose that offer. So I'm just going to go in the studio and I'm just going to pray. So that's how it started. So I went back into the studio and I prayed. And I was like, okay, God, just show me what now? What do you want me to do with that piece? Here's my offer. You tell me. And it was really interesting because all of a sudden I had images flashing through my mind as well and saw other people working with me. And I felt that this piece still needed to be about dreams and promises and aspirations. But all of a sudden it kind of flipped. And the question I had in my mind was, what if those very things that usually give us life is the very thing that breaks our neck? If those dreams are all of a sudden the ones that, those promises are broken promises, if those dreams are being shattered, if those dreams are what give us life are being the very thing that are abused. And that triggered me back into several stories I had heard about modern slavery and human trafficking. And quite often I would sit in, and hear like a story, a case study or something about a woman, a child being exploited. And there was this volcano in me going, I want to do something about that, and felt like I was completely unable to, inadequate, impossible for me to do anything about it, really. Yes, I could join and volunteer for an organization, but that wasn't enough for me. Somehow I need to do more than just that. So the short piece Dare to Dream became Bound, which then was the very first piece of Justice in Motion. Sorry, this is a long story to get to this point, and then it goes a bit quicker. But I think it's significant because it was a long process, and then just fell into place. And I wanted to work on this piece, had no idea where to start and how to do it. And then I approached someone from the Pegasus Theatre, Houghton Daly. He was the artistic director, and then he just was so incredibly supportive. I asked him, like, what do I need to do to get, to bring a performance into this theatre? And he came with this huge diary and just went from, okay, how about next October? I've got those 2 dates free in the theatre, so you could have the week beforehand and do your tech rehearsals for the week, and then the month beforehand you can have the studio and rehearse.
Wow.
It was just before Christmas that year in 2012, and it was like unbelievable. So it was just falling into place. He then also helped me write and funding applications, so I did that with him, and he mentored me in creating the work, and so it was just incredibly helpful. What a blessing, honestly. But as we were writing the funding application, I just felt more and more compelled that this wasn't a one-off thing. It felt like this piece was important, but it wasn't the only story that I needed to tell. And so we changed the entire funding application and said, instead of working on this piece, we want to set up this company called Justice in Motion, and give it an umbrella, so that Bound is just in the inaugural performance, and then it's going to be a long string of other performances. Following on from that, but there's more topics we want to talk about. And that moment was really interesting, because all of a sudden it felt like a puzzle piece had finally slotted into place, and people that knew me and heard me talk, they were like, oh yeah, of course that. And all of a sudden, I kid you not, ideas started coming into my brain. I was like, oh, I could do this, I want to make a piece about this, want to make a piece about this and that. And then I was like, okay, God, too many. So that just gave me real clarity. What was also phenomenal was the realization that all of a sudden I wasn't just a performer, because that was what I was trained in and what I wanted to do. All of a sudden I had to become a director, I had to become a bookkeeper, an administrator, a fundraiser, a marketer, a PR person, a manager, all those things, a web designer, everything. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I've not signed up for this. And if I would have known that at the beginning, when I was excited about the journey, I don't think I would have started it. Yeah, exactly. So it was just like, okay, one after the other. The realization dawned on me and was like, why am I doing this? However, without me not really knowing what I'm doing, quite frankly. I knew how to perform. I knew how to write pieces maybe as well. I learned that, or devise pieces, but I did not know anything else. And yet it worked. And yet we had funding. And yet we kept going from strength to strength. And so it just showed me day in and out that God really had his hand on it from the off, and he kept breathing into it. And I keep saying, like, as long as he's in it, I'm in it. If he's not, there's no way I can do this. I'm out of there if he's not in it. So it's been that constant relationship with God, Holy Spirit, to just really maneuver me through the company and through the work that we do as well. So yeah. Wow. That was a bit of a long-winded way of saying that's what I do. I love the company and the opportunities we have now to tell those stories that, as you said earlier as well, are otherwise untold.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, we're talking about years of experience, and now we're trying to put it into, a 30-minute, 45-minute conversation. So yeah, it does need some, just back story to get us there. And I appreciate that faithfulness on your part. And I just was having a conversation with a friend actually earlier today about how, God does equip those who he's calling into particular areas. And it might not feel like it's our sphere. And yet if we're open, the Spirit of God's going to continue to teach us. And we will, if we are teachable, be able to do those things that are exceedingly abundantly, because it's God doing them through us. So I appreciate what you just said about and yet. It's the other phrase here, can be but God, did those things. I'd love to hear more about just that listening component, because like you said, there's these creative ideas that come. I know for me, I've had just like a log of creative ideas that have gone years and years and years ago that haven't come to fruition yet. It doesn't mean that they won't. It just wasn't the right time. So there's some that I've looked back at and it's like, oh, now is the time for that. It's something that you gave me, 20 years ago. So how do you feel like you discern and hear God speaking to you? A small question.
How do you actually listen? How do I listen? That's a good point. I think for me, it comes down to, what do I have peace over? And one of my teachers at one point said, an idea, we carry it pregnant, and it feels almost like the seed, the plant, the initial seed is there, and then you just carry it. And you test it, and you push it, like you push some doors, and you bounce ideas off with others as well, and then you see where it develops and how it grows. And sometimes it's a stillborn, right? Sometimes it just about gets to life and doesn't continue. Other times we have an idea and we kill it in the seed. So for me, it's always been a case of, what do I care about? Yeah. The song "Break My Heart for What Breaks Yours." That has been one of the phrases that I've said many, many times. And so I trust that God will break my heart for what he wants to say. And that those stories that I'm heartbroken about are the ones that I need to be telling. And there's so many, and there's so much I could be saying, right, on stage all the time. And yet I feel like there's usually something that goes, this is being highlighted. So for example, human trafficking is a huge, huge, huge area. And we could probably continue the entirety of Justice in Motion just on that topic and just explore the different areas and elements of it. which we don't necessarily. I don't know, it might end up that way. It's a topic we've come back to again and again. But for example, Bound was very much about modern slavery in 3 areas. So the sex trade, construction, and hospitality. And we merged those 3 storylines together to tell this story. And in the conversations I had afterwards with people, and kind of Q&As afterwards, and feedback loop that we had from audience members, most of them said that they're kind of aware of it within the sex trade and familiar with that. Maybe hospitality, they can see why that would be the case. But construction, that was a big question. And I was like, well, yes. So we started looking into that a bit more. And I had the privilege to meet the CEO from the Chartered Institute of Building, who at the time, Chris Blythe, he was really passionate about modern slavery, as addressing modern slavery rather, and mental health. Those were the 2 big key elements that they wanted to address. And he told me that actually the construction industry is one of the most prone to exploitation. I think the second most prone to exploitation, because the supply chain is so long. So we were like, well, okay, let's make a piece that picks up on specifically that. And hence then the project called On Edge, which we brought to life, because we were like, this story needs to be told more. And important for me as well, in every work that we create, there is an element of research within that. We vigorously research the topic before we even go into the studio. We explore the theme. We talk to organizations, we talk to survivors or people affected where and as we can. Not always possible, but where it's possible, we do. And it's more like almost investigative journalism, but that then, rather than writing an article, it becomes a piece of theatre for us. So that's kind of the approach we take. And I started digging into that and then realized, okay, this is a much, much, much bigger topic and is really relevant to talk about. So yeah, On Edge was born out of that. That was one listening for sure. Also, the CIOB then entered a 3-year funding deal with us, which allowed us the finances to actually make the work. And it was literally one door opened and the next one opened, the next one opened, the next one opened. And it just had that idea, that seed had gained momentum. And yeah, as I say, pushing doors. Now we've just been thinking about a piece about something completely different and have been applying for funding and pushing doors. And it's been an idea I've had on my heart for a long time. And yet doors keep closing. So I'm like, okay, maybe not, or maybe not yet. So then I keep going further with it and try into a new direction maybe.
Yeah, that listening is so profound. Yeah, I want to share that, the Edge, the trailer, so people can see that and just have a bit of an idea of what we're talking about here. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit play. Vimeo. Maybe it'll go here. Try again. I apologize. Actually, I'm going to go back out of that and just play it from there.
You can go full screen, right, the little bottom, yeah, that one.
It's incredibly moving. It's so moving. Like, we were like brought to tears watching it. It's like, oh my God, connecting with this man trying to escape. About how it's an amazing representation of humanity, the vulnerability of the human soul connecting with each other. What does freedom mean for you? It's everything. Incredible. It was beautiful. You could feel what I felt. Like I was there. I was like, I was there.
so you gave some ideas about that, right? And I love hearing the audience, their response. And also I love the site-specific aspect of your work and how in some of your other works, I see that you do that. And then film, you're working with film a fair amount. Yeah, I just would love to hear more about that, just maybe what you've learned in it or how you feel like God is moving in particular, because I believe we've got to stay current with these, current technologies, because the reality is we're in a technological age, but also the reality is pandemic's on the rise again. It's just, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about that aspect of, do you feel like it diminishes your art? It enhances it? What challenges? I'm sure we could spend hours now on this part.
I'll try to be succinct. Yes, so site specific. So with Bound, I always had the wish, because the whole scenography is based on a building site, and I always wanted to take it onto a building site and perform there, or put it into a hotel and have it, more of an immersive experience, and all sorts of ideas with that project. But then what really triggered us to go outdoors was the fact that we wanted to reach people with messages that we're bringing, with with raising awareness about those issues of modern slavery, of exploitation. And it felt almost like the people that came to the theatre and that were willing to buy a theatre ticket were those that were already converted, right? And there was a crossover, either people that were interested in the art form and the theatre and did not necessarily know about the topic, so they really learned a lot, or you had people that were interested in the topic and weren't necessarily familiar with theatre and the power of theatre, and as such there was a great crossover. However, in order to address those issues within our society, it is a whole, it needs a system change, really. It's all of us that are affected by it and that are responsible for it as well somehow. So we all need to have greater awareness in order for there to be actual change. And then we were saying, like, we can't keep performing indoors. I love the indoors, and we will surely keep doing that as well. But outdoors is definitely much more important to be and to bringing our work to. Now, a lot of work outdoor work by its nature was always political generally. So that's the thing. That's how it started really off. But it's become very entertaining as well. So there's a lot of street theatre which is purely for its entertainment, and that's great, and that's really brings a lot of joy and fabulous for families. But for me, it was really important that we would still be really narrative driven and really strong in the story, in the messages that we're telling. So On Edge was a real a tryout, I would say. It's like, let's see how audiences respond to a 40-minute show that's really hard-hitting. That's also really beautiful and really gorgeous and exciting to watch and all of that. And one of the things we said, like, if in order to grab people's attention and for them to stay, there's got to be something with it. And so parkour was one thing that came up. A friend mentioned it to me and said he'd seen some parkour athletes, and they work on a lot of scaffolding structures, which look similar to our set that we use in Bound. So if we wanted to do a show outdoors about the construction industry, why don't we do a piece that involves a lot of scaffolding, obviously? And why don't we do parkour? And I was like, well, I don't know parkour. So let me get some athletes in, let's just explore that idea. And that's become really a running theme for our company as well, in any case, that we do physical theatre. That's our main basic background, or that's the main genre we use. But then depending on what story we're telling or what community we're working with is the additional element of movement. So now we're combining parkour with physical theatre. It's been an incredibly exciting journey because we got in parkour athletes that had never done theatre before and theatre performers that might have not done parkour before. Beautiful exchange there, and lots of learning, lots of failing, lots of learning and more development. So that was phenomenal. And we put it out there. We had some funding to do the tour. SADC IOB supported it. Without Walls, an outdoor consortium, supported it as well. And immediately we had a reach of about 4 times the amount of people, or even more, I don't even know. Lots and lots of people, thousands. Plus, our turnover had over doubled, because festival circuits do work very differently than indoor theatre. The funding model there is really very broken in the UK here. And so it was like a win-win on all levels. We're like, okay, great. So clearly something's happening here. And then the pandemic happened and nothing happened. Yeah. So from having just really gained momentum in 2018, 2019, 2020 was just, okay, that's not going to happen then. Now, as you can see in this video as well, the trailer that you just showed, we put a lot of emphasis on really good quality video material, because it's the best way of promoting, but also the best way of capturing movement, of course. Images are great, text is great, but moving image is definitely stronger. A lot of our athletes are incredible filmmakers as well, because they just have the eye for it and the interest in technology as well. So again, we just made use of who we had, not use, but well, we used whatever skill people brought in, and made the best out of that, really, or made the most out of their offer, really. So the pandemic came, we knew we wouldn't be able to tour on Edge again until at least this year. And we had this other piece on the back burner, which was just meant to be a short creative research collaboration with Dr. Bronwyn Tarr, who had explored connectivity and how moving together can bring connectivity and community and alleviate loneliness, therefore. And initially, I say that was meant to be just maybe a 10-minute dance piece that we were creating alongside everything else. But then with the pandemic coming up, we're like, okay, we can't really do that either. But then on the other hand, loneliness is one of the big topics that people will have to wrestle with, even more so. Yeah. And it's not only, based on the pandemic, but it's a much larger issue in any case. So we started exploring that and had to find ways of making this project whilst being in lockdown. So we adapted very quickly and changed that very quickly. And what we did was interview several people within the communities we knew, but also overseas, and ask them about their experience of loneliness and its opposite. And for some, that was belonging, connection, community, whatever it might have been. Out of those interviews which we recorded, we then created short soundtracks. Our composer did, rather. Then these were given to dancers who created a short piece of movement. And that all was then filmed and put into a short 1.5 to 2 minute video that we called Video Gift, because we really wanted to give something back to the participants that so generously shared their experience with us ahead of time. That's another thing that's really important for us, that we don't just extract from people and go, ta-da, now we're making this cool thing. And then, they don't get anything out of it. So that's really important for us, that we would have that loop and give it back to them. And it was phenomenal to see the impact it had on people, to seeing their stories reflected back to them, and a creative interpretation of what they shared with us. And often what they said, what they felt was so irrelevant almost. And we're like, well, not to us. This was really amazing and fueled us to make something really beautiful as well. But also several people said that now they're looking back at a very dark time, but through the lens of beauty. And that was just something that came up more and more, that we offered people beauty and a different perspective, different perception of their story as well. So from those video gifts, that was only videos, as I say, we then created a short film as well, because we felt it was really important to make more of an amalgamation of everyone's story put into one. Because as we were listening to people and through the interviews, we realized that there were several kind of strands of loneliness. Yeah. One, the social loneliness, that you feel alone because you haven't got your social network, or the emotional loneliness, that you could be in a crowd of people, but you're still alone and feel alone, or within a family or whatever. And then you have the existential loneliness, where it's really a lack of purpose and not knowing what to do with yourself and not being able to get out of that trot and kind of needing external help, really. And so that is something we wanted to pick up in the short film. With that, we also felt we can't call this project Moving Together without actually moving together. We're all still in our little, tiny living rooms, and that's where we are. So we created a big flash mob where we taught some of the movement material to anyone who wanted to learn it, and then met online and danced it together, which then was live streamed in different areas and on everyone's platforms as well. And so it had kind of this ripple effect as well of a flash mob and surprise element. Great fun, mental, but great fun as well. That project was actually picked up by RAF Benson, so an army base, or an RAF base, Royal Air Force. And we then had the privilege to talk to some of the staff and officers from there. And again, really, really interesting and a privilege to work with them. Having done all that and realized how much more people we can reach with video, we're like, actually, this is a really interesting media for us as well. And again, within the company, we have the skill set. So why not do more film? So right now, our next endeavor is going to be to create a film version of On Edge. Not just filming the show, but rewriting it for film. So that's our next big ambition by the end of this year. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah, film is definitely something we're stepping into more and more, and we'll just see what comes out of it.
That's so beautiful. I've watched it. I don't know if it's considered a trailer, but just excerpts of the stories. And I love in particular what one of the gentlemen says is just as he's hearing his story articulated, because you take the sound bites of the interviews, but then also having a dancer embody what was articulated down to fine details that he really felt known and seen, and how powerful that is. But also the aspect of now I have a video that's a minute and a half long, so when I'm encountering people, family, friends, I can say, would you watch this, because this will be the thing that I'm not able to say, and I've been paralyzed and not able to speak. And so his perspective was, everybody needs this in their life, right? Everybody needs a video like this to relay in the places where, we've become paralyzed. So it's so powerful, and it's so just poignant. And I think maybe we're in the day where obviously the video and the visual component is because of where we are in technology. And maybe, 100 years ago, everybody would have said, we just need somebody to write my short story that's, a minute and a half long and reading, or, but it just is so powerful. And that work that you're doing is really transforming lives, but also it's a new and in, I think, a creative way that's relevant, that keeps reaching outside the confines of that church wall where people have, historically gathered. And you all are being the church, and you're doing it out there, and you're being the church, even though you're probably working with people who aren't yet, in the church, or claiming or understanding, or identifying themselves in that way. So it's so beautiful and so powerful. And yeah, I'm looking forward to people watching, getting connected to your website and being able to see what's going on, because it's really you're pioneers in this area, and it's really important work that you're doing, significant work that's being done.
Thank you. Yeah, we try.
Yeah,
all of the videos are visible on our Instagram, on our website, on YouTube, and we have also started a Moving Together Instagram, which is just a gallery of all of the video gifts. So I think over the years, that's going to fill up, and there will just be hundreds and
Oh, that's so good and so great.
Hundreds and hundreds other communities as well, and pass it up, can benefit from it as well.
I know they will. Yeah, I know people will, and I love that we have access to get people connected to that. I can't wait. There's so many communities of people that are right now focusing on artistic endeavors, but also other communities focusing on mental, emotional wellness and health. And so this is a good work for sure. So in closing, just what would you encourage people to endeavor in their life, either as a creative or using gifts or talents or hearing from God, or just what do you feel like you're learning in this season that's helping you to continue to endeavor? And I know part of it's in new arenas and new territories.
One of the big things is listening, actually, just to pick up on that again. During moving together, one of the big things was listening, just listening to people and what they really want to share. And that's been so phenomenal. And I think just the act of listening was a gift to them as well, and already brought so much healing that somebody would just sit and listen to what they had to say and genuinely listen without any judgment, just listen. And the other thing that people said was as well, just knowing that others were lonely too made me feel less lonely. So, and again, just being vulnerable, being open, being vulnerable enough to share and to be honest with each other. And that's also a way how I very much approached my position, just being really honest. A position as director of the company, being really honest and open, and acknowledging my failures, acknowledging my shortcomings, my weaknesses, and celebrating the fact that in my weakness he is strong, right? Kind of one thing you'd asked me before of a scripture as well. The one that was really important for me for years as well, and still is John 15:16, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, where God says, "You didn't choose me," or Jesus says rather, "You didn't choose me, I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last." And so that has really been my thing, my mantra almost, like to produce, to bear fruit that is going to last and that is going to be relevant. And maybe to close off just with another quote by Leonard Bernstein, which again, has been a very strong one in my life. He says, the point is that art never stopped a war and never got anybody a job. That was never its function. Art cannot change events, but it can change people. It can affect people so that they are changed. Because people are changed by art. They are enriched, ennobled, encouraged. They then act in a way that may affect the course of events, by the way they vote, they behave, and the way they think. And that's really what Justice in Motion is all about. That we want to impact people and help transform thinking, perhaps, and create positive change, and allow people to just, go back, reflect, and get greater understanding of something to hopefully bring some transformation into this world. And through all of that, all we do, it's dark subjects that we pick up, and really difficult subjects, but we do that through a lens of hope, of love, of reconciliation, and of redemption. And I think that's where God comes in. Even though we're not officially a Christian company as such, that is our DNA, and that is what we're obviously trying to give people on the way as well. Just that love and kindness and recognition as well. So
that goes a long way. I think even just in that, reflecting, you've got that ethos of, Christian morals, values, biblical foundation. It's all woven there. Even Christ was slow to reveal who he was, right? It came through actions and love and service and getting close and listening And then the transformation came, and then he got to the place to say, well, this is who I am, unapologetically. And he didn't always lead with that. And so I think that's an important way to realize we can very much be like God in how we love and how we serve, and just what you all are doing that will bring people in that might not ever come in had they already thought that there was a particular label. So
that's a really good reminder. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you all are
being a testament to everyone that I work with as well, and just, you know, being genuine in my walk with God. And no matter where people come from, know that they're welcome.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's good. I think it's a lot like God to not already prejudge or outcast before people even have a chance to get near. If that were the case, I'd have been long gone, right? God could have said, see ya, because you don't quite fit the mold. So work in progress, which I'm so very thankful. And I love the part about what you've articulated, both in videos, but just in this conversation. It's a part of the process, right? We can be so determined at times about the end result, which is great. We want to have something that's high quality and effective and accomplishes what our calling is in the completion. And yet so much more of it really can happen in that whole process. And that's where these people are feeling known and heard and loved and supported and have a place of belonging. Well, I'm so glad to be on this planet with you and to know that we belong in a similar tribe and are in approach of just our God in similar ways and some different ways. But yeah, I just bless you, Anja, and your continued endeavors, and knowing that God is going to keep blessing you in abundance with all of your yeses. So
amen.
Hallelujah.
I'll take it all.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be part of that tribe, one of the best ones.
That's right? Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you, my sister, and bless you. And again, just appreciate this time together.
Bless you too. Good to meet you. Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah.